Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting stuck right into the IPL 2025 final.
Yeah, what a final it was.
Absolutely historic. You had two teams, Royal Challengers Bengaluru and Punjab Kings, facing off.
And neither of them had ever won the trophy before, after 18 years of the league.
Exactly, 18 long years. So you knew one team's wait was finally going to end.
While the other was going to face that familiar disappointment. The stakes couldn't have been higher, really.
Yeah, immense pressure. And we've got loads of material here, articles on the final itself, the history between RCB and PBKS.
And lots of online discussion, too, right? From fans, observers, digging into RCB's journey.
Totally. Trying to figure out why it took so long, and what finally clicked this year.
So that's our mission today. We'll unpack that rivalry, look at the key stats going in, the result, obviously.
And then really dive into that analysis from the sources. Why the past struggles for RCB? What changed?
Let's get into it.
Okay, so the big story. RCB versus PBKS, both hunting for that first ever IPL title.
First time since, 2008, that we knew for sure a new name was going on the trophy.
Incredible. And their head-to-head history before this final, it was, perfectly balanced.
Yeah, dead even. 36 matches played between them since the start of the IPL.
And it was 18 wins each. You couldn't make it up, really. 50-50.
But this season, 2025, leading up to the final, RCB seemed to have the edge.
They did. They played 3 times before the final, and RCB won 2 of those.
PBKS got the first one, remember?
Yeah.
That rain-affected game.
Right. But then RCB hit back straight away just 2 days later, won by 7 wickets, showed some resilience there.
And then the big one, before the final qualifier won.
Which was, kind of surprisingly, the very first time they'd ever met in an IPL playoff match. After all those years.
And RCB really dominated that one. The sources made a big deal of it. Bowled PBKS out for just 101.
Yeah, and chased it down super quick. It felt like a real statement win, didn't it?
Definitely set the tone. Now, talking about venues, historically, Chinnaswamy, RCB's home.
They had a slight edge there, 7-6 over PBKS, and they led at Old Mohali, too.
PBKS, though, seemed to struggle a bit at their new place in Molanpur, where that qualifier actually happened.
But the final was in Ahmedabad, Narendra Modi Stadium.
And interestingly, PBKS had actually won the only time these two had played there before, back in 2021.
So maybe a little psychological boost for Punjab going in, or something they could cling to.
Perhaps, yeah. The sources sort of hinted at that. On neutral ground overall, PBKS actually had the better record before the final.
And what about key players in this rivalry? Kohli, obviously.
Oh, massively. Way out in front is the top run scorer against PBKS. Over 1,100 runs.
1,116 in 35 innings. Yeah, just huge numbers.
And with the ball, Yuzvendra Chahal. Most wickets, 28.
And the sources noted PBKS were missing their main spinner, Chahal's old teammate, due to injury in the playoffs that must have hurt them.
Yeah, could have been a big factor, given his record against RCB.
Okay, so the history, the build-up, the stats, it all led to Ahmedabad. What happened? Who finally did it?
It was RCB. Royal Challengers Bengaluru. They finally got their hands on the trophy.
Wow! After all this time.
Beat Punjab Kings by just 6 runs in the end. A nail-biter.
6 runs. Close. What were the scores?
RCB batted first, made 190 for 9. Kohli contributed again, got 43.
Okay, decent total.
And PBKS, in the chase, they got close, finished on 184 for 7. Krunal Pandya was singled out for RCB with the ball, 2 for 17, very tight spell.
Incredible. So that win finally breaks the deadlock in the head-to-head too, right?
Exactly. After 37 matches, RCB now lead 19 wins to 18, tipped the scales after 18 years.
Just amazing. But, the moment they won, everyone must have been thinking, why now? Why did it take so long?
Yeah, that question hung over everything. And that's where those online discussions we looked at get really interesting.
Because RCB's history, it's full of near misses, isn't it? They reached the playoffs loads of times.
More than CSK and MI, apparently, according to one source.
Yeah.
And reached the final before.
But also had these real slumps, like 2012-14, then again 2017-19. Just couldn't find that consistency.
So yeah, the sources tried to pin down the reasons, what kept going wrong.
What were the main themes that came up in those analyses?
One big one was this idea of lacking a really strong, consistently performing Indian core.
Right. Not that they didn't have Indian players, but maybe not enough reliable ones firing together.
Pretty much. Beyond, the 1 or 2 superstars, 2016 was seen as maybe okay-ish on that front.
But 2017, their worst season, apparently really exposed that weakness when injuries hit.
Exactly. They mentioned names like KL Rahul, Sarfaraz Khan, Sachin Baby, Iqbal Abdullah. Even Yuzi Chahal early on.
Wow.
Players whose form or retention or availability just wasn't consistent enough as a group.
Okay, so the Indian core, what else?
Squad balance.
Yeah.
Just the overall structure of the team.
That feels like a criticism we've heard for years about RCB.
It does. A perpetual thing, it seems. Especially the middle order. People felt it's been fragile since maybe 2015.
Right, so not having that solid engine room.
Yeah, contrasted with what the sources saw as like an ideal balanced team. Good openers, anchors, finishers, all-rounders, and crucially reliable Indian bowlers for different phases.
Yeah.
RCB often seemed to be missing key pieces of that puzzle.
And then there's the spending, the big buys.
Linked to the overseas player issue, often. The argument was twofold. Sometimes they overspent on big names.
Maybe guys past their peak or not even regular internationals.
That was the claim, yeah. And then they couldn't always rely on all 4 overseas guys firing consistently through a whole season.
Any specific examples mentioned?
Oh, yeah. Yuvraj Singh's big signing came up. Tymel Mills, Shane Watson towards the end, Kyle Jamieson, Alzari Joseph more recently.
Yeah.
These big-ticket buys that didn't always deliver consistently, according to the critics.
So, spending big, but maybe not always smart, and quick to sell, too.
That was definitely part of it. People contrast it with how, say, MI or SRH supposedly build squads developing Indian talent, finding maybe cheaper, role-specific overseas players rather than just headline names.
Which kind of feeds into the next point, the reliance on the superstars.
Absolutely. Kohli, A.B. de Villiers, Chris Gale before them.
The big 3 narrative.
Exactly. The view was, if those guys failed, where were the runs coming from? Lack the depth you saw in teams like, say, DC or MI, who seemed to have multiple match winners.
Okay, now, this is a big one. Virat Kohli's captaincy. The sources had a lot to say, right? And it sounded pretty divided.
Very divided.
Yeah.
Passionate arguments on both sides. We should just lay out what people were saying.
Go for it. What was the case against his captaincy being a factor? Or rather, the case for it being a factor in past failures?
Okay, so some users argued strongly it was a major reason. They'd compare him to Dhoni, Rohit, Gambhir.
Captains seen as maybe elevating their teams more, getting the best out of everyone?
That was the argument, that maybe Kohli didn't quite have that knack for lifting the whole squad in the same way.
Right, and the counter-argument, why might it not have been the main issue?
Well, some suggested his huge brand value meant he kept the captaincy, maybe longer than purely cricketing reasons would dictate, implying ownership priorities perhaps.
So, focus on commercial side over winning.
That was one line of thought. Others just felt the blame was misplaced, that the bigger issues were management, recruitment, squad balance, things outside the captain's direct control on the field.
So, no easy answer there. Lots of different opinions.
Definitely no consensus in the threads we saw.
Were there other factors mentioned? Beyond those big ones?
Yeah, a few other things came up. Poor talent retention was one, like letting KL Rahul go, Quinton de Kock, Shivam Dubey, guys who've shown elsewhere.
Ouch. Yeah, that always stings fans.
And also the team composition, maybe not always suiting Chinnaswamy's flat pitch, needing a specific kind of bowling attack that they didn't always have.
And inevitably the curse talk.
Yeah, that feeling among some fans that they were just destined to, bottle it in big moments comes from years of frustration, I guess.
It really paints a picture of a team battling on multiple fronts, tactical, structural, maybe even mental.
For sure. Whole range of explanations.
So, given all that history, all those perceived problems, did the sources point to anything specific in 2025 that showed things were changing? Any moments or details?
Yes, definitely. Some discussions zoomed in on particular matches or performances from this season. Like there was one thread talking about a specific chase. Not the final, but an earlier game.
Okay.
RCB were chasing 176, won by 4 wickets. And what fans highlighted was who got them over the line.
Not just the usual suspects.
Exactly. Dinesh Karthik smashed like 28 off 10 balls. And Mahipal Lomar chipped in too from the lower order.
Ah, so showing that depth that people felt was missing before.
That seemed to be the point people were making, yeah. Pushing back against that over-reliance on stars idea, at least in that instance.
Interesting. What about the bowling? Always a concern for RCB.
Well, in that same match discussion, Yash Dayal got a mention. Bowled economically, 1 for 23.
And fans were defending him.
Yeah, pointing to his improvement after, he'd had some tough times before, suggesting maybe the bowling unit was developing. Siraj's improvement was mentioned elsewhere, too.
So little signs that maybe the old patterns weren't holding quite as strong.
Fans were definitely looking for them. You saw comments like Harpreet Brar being called an RCB killer, focusing on those individual battles. And Dinesh Karthik.
Ah, the T20 World Cup year theory again.
Exactly. That came up a lot. Him finding form just when a World Cup is around the corner.
It's amazing how these narratives stick. Did we see any comments from the players themselves? From Kohli?
Yeah, one source had some quotes from Kohli early in the season, after the second game apparently.
What did he say?
Things like, calm down, it's only the second game.
Yeah.
Maybe pushing back at early criticism. And then this other quote.
Yeah.
My name is only associated with promoting T20 cricket. I guess I'm still useful.
Ooh, how did people read that?
Well, you could imagine. Lots saw it as a bit of a dig. Maybe it's selectors, maybe media, questioning his T20 future or role. Shows the pressure he's always under.
No kidding. It's also interesting, though. You mentioned in that chase where Karthik and Lamore did well, some of the big overseas names, Faf, Green, Maxwell, and they actually didn't score much in that game.
Yeah, that's a good point. So while one source suggested RCB were becoming less reliant on overseas players this year,
this specific game kind of shows they won despite the big overseas bats not firing, which maybe points to that improved depth again.
or maybe just finding ways to win even when the stars don't align perfectly, which might be the biggest change of all, linking back to all those historical criticisms. Did they finally find that winning formula, that resilience?
So, okay, we've walked through the rivalry, the final itself, RCD finally champions.
And we've dived deep into why, according to fans and analysts, it took them so long. The squad balance issues, the spending, the star dependency, the captaincy debates.
All that history, the near misses, the curse, ending with that victory in 2025.
An 18-year wait over. Quite a story.
So, thinking about everything we've discussed, all the analysis over the years about what RCB needed to fix, and now they've finally done it.
What's the big takeaway, you think? For you, listening. What does RCB's long road to victory tell us?
Was it like they finally addressed those specific structural problems we talked about? Better balance, smarter buys, more depth?
Or was it finding the right combination of players and coaching staff just clicking at the perfect moment, that intangible chemistry?
Or maybe after all the tactical talk, was a big part of it just breaking through that mental barrier, overcoming the weight of history, that choker tag they sometimes had?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's the secret sauce in a league like the IPL? Is it the strategy, the talent, the mindset, or just getting all three to align finally, something to ponder on after their historic win?